Welcome to the Big Biz Show.
Taking care of business.
You want fast-talking, hard-hitting discussions on business and finance? Maybe with a barroom slant and some really salty peanuts? We're not counting calories. We're counting cash. Before we get to the man with the financial plan, meet the money team. Costa, Mary, and Greg. Now Captain Finance himself, Sully.
Hey there, live from the Loft 100 studios in sunny San Diego, California. Big Biz Show is on the air. Great to have you along today. Mary, Bert, Godwin, and Greg in with me, and of course, in the Day Trader Trio. Hello, guys. Can you give me a little love?
Hello.
Here we go. Costa's off for a couple of days. Hopefully, his family gets better from an illness. The American love affair with stocks is apparently deepening, except for with Mary, because she doesn't check the stock market or her bank balance, apparently. So you got these frenetic day traders. You know what a day trader is? If I say day trader?
No.
It's guys that are not just, you're more of a
You could probably figure it out.
Yeah.
You're more of a set it and forget it investor.
Yes,
right?
correct. Yes.
You're not buying and selling every day.
Right.
That's a day trader.
Hence the fact I don't check it every morning.
Which is okay.
Yeah.
I think that's good. Even venture capital and equity funds are pulling fresh money at an unprecedented pace. We have this major love affair with the stock market right now, overall. And in recent decades, they've done this thing called share buybacks. So when a company goes on the open market, uses its cash to buy its own stock, that sends a huge signal to the shareholders, like, hey, we're even investing in ourselves now.
Okay, yeah.
And there's only one reason a stock goes up. You know what that reason is?
More buying than selling.
More buying than selling. That's it. Now, there's a million reasons that you'd buy a stock, but there's only one reason a stock goes up, more buying than selling. So these share buybacks create value for the shareholders. The downside to a stock buyback is because they're typically financed not by cash in the bank, but they usually get debt to buy the stock. This would be like taking a mortgage out of your house and investing it in the stock market.
Right.
Forgetting that we have to pay interest on them, right?
Yeah.
So your net gain is much less than you anticipate.
Right.
But there are more bull market rankings now than almost ever before. So the pundits, the people that are trading the stock in the market, every single day, much like on the NFL, there's an injury report because of the betting lines.
Yeah.
Same thing happens because what happens with the market? You're betting somewhat that something, but it's an educated bet, that a stock is going to go up. Not since 1932, okay, which was roughly 12 years after the Great Depression, okay, have we seen such exuberance in the stock market.
And is that since the election? Is this politically charged? Or?
Same thing happened in the year 2016, and then again 2024. It's interesting though, because you would think, and both of those times you had a Republican administration, which doesn't track with history, because with history, economic growth goes much greater with a Republican administration, but the stock market doesn't, which is just crazy. So at the end of the day, the S&P has gained 75%, okay, 75% in the last 4.5 years. Velocity is everything, right? So the question is, how do you get in if you have missed out so far, okay? And the way to answer that is, you just start investing.
You just start.
You have to
right?
start. Right?
You can't worry about it.
Like how do you start eating better? You just start eating better. Speaking of which, we're going to be at the Microcap Conference. It's called the Microcap Conference. It's the largest independent microcap event in the United States. Microcap are sub $10, $5 stocks. And at the end of the day, there's investors, presentations. Howie's going to be there. Devin's going to be there.
Hey, our crew's
Devin and Howie are going to be there. And there's going to be healthcare companies, technology companies, energy companies. There'll be investors there. We're going to be there right with them. I say that we go out there and actually do a show.
I was going to say, can we zoom in?
A big biz show to go.
Yeah.
Where is this place?
It's in New Jersey. Maybe you've heard of it.
No.
It's in January in New Jersey.
Europe?
Little fridge.
I'll stay here.
Yeah.
I think we should stay right here in cozy California.
Big shout out to the Microcap Conference. We will be there January 28th through the 30th. They will be there January 28th through the 30th. You can go to microcapconference.com, I think. I'm not even sure of the website, but we'll be there.
That
More Big
sounds
Biz
good.
coming up. Stand by. Diego, California. Big Biz Show is on the air. 125 million TV homes strong. Thank you to Biz Television Network, Bloomberg, Alpha and Shero, Bloomberg EU, American Life Network, and let's not forget radio and American Forces Radio Network and television services in 175 countries and all the ships at sea. Thanks for coming on. Mary's here, Greg's here, Sully's here, and Jonathan Javitt is here from NRX Pharma, but no Mike Costa. He's out for a couple of days on a personal thing. Let's say hello to the Day Trader trio. What's up, guys? Good to see you.
What's up?
Hey, Dr. Javitt's here. How are you, sir?
It's great
Good to see you. You are in Southern California because of a number of things. But before we get to JP Morgan, all of that, you and I were talking before the show, and we are in Carlsbad, California, which is in San Diego, but we broadcast everywhere. Here in Carlsbad, as you mentioned, there's 3 or 4 ketamine clinics. You can swing a dead cat and hit a ketamine clinic. Mm-hmm. And yet you are talking about opening up just that, or more than that, with Hope and NRX. Talk about the difference between what you're doing and what they're doing, and why that's so earth-shattering for us, because it's some pretty remarkable stuff you guys are accomplishing.
Well, yeah, the use of ketamine in depression, PTSD, was an incredible discovery. Yeah, as I told you, it started out in 1987 when my brother Dan discovered the role of the NMDA receptor in the brain and the role of phencyclidine angel dust in causing psychosis in people, making people mashugana.
I love that. Yeah.
And it turns out that phencyclidine blocks the NMDA receptor, and 10 years later, Rob Berman at Yale showed that if you block it a little more gently with ketamine, because phencyclidine is a dangerous drug, you actually decrease depression. And that's where that all started. So people jumped on the ketamine bandwagon because ketamine is the first drug ever to knock down depression and suicidality in a matter of hours. Now, it's not that durable. It lasts 3 to 5 days. It's addictive. It's hallucinogenic. But it changed the whole field of psychiatry forever. And a bunch of people who had really no business treating depression and suicidality with ketamine started opening clinics.
Okay.
A lot of these clinics are run by nurses, by people who are not prepared to really embrace precision psychiatry, but they know that people like the effect of ketamine.
Sure.
The problem is that ketamine's not enough. Ketamine gives you about a 50% effect, which is an extraordinary effect. Nobody's ever seen anything like that in psychiatry.
What is the effect specifically?
The effect specifically is that ketamine will decrease depressive thoughts and suicidal thoughts in a matter of hours. And that's never before been seen in psychiatry.
In about 50% of the cases, though. Is that what you're...
Well, a 50% effect.
Okay,
yeah.
a 50% effect. Okay, very good.
Okay. But to really get a durable effect, you've got to combine ketamine with other modalities of care. There's something called transcranial magnetic stimulation, which is a machine that sits outside the head, uses magnetism to achieve an antidepressive, anti-suicidal effect. The FDA just certified the first what they call digital therapeutic. It's actually an app that sits on your phone that has a therapeutic effect. So we don't talk about a ketamine clinic. We talk about interventional psychiatry, precision psychiatry, where you're combining those modalities in a manner that's really patient-centric and individualized.
So it's an enterprise-wide solution.
That's one way to look at it.
Do psychedelics factor into this as well? Because I know people talk about microdosing and psychedelics.
Psychedelics are brand new.
Okay.
So the reason we were able to do this work with ketamine is because ketamine's been approved as an anesthetic since the Vietnam War.
Oh.
It was actually developed by the Army. They needed an anesthetic that could be used on the battlefield that wouldn't make you stop breathing. Every other anesthetic, like Michael Jackson died of propofol.
Mm-hmm.
All those other anesthetics make you stop breathing. So unless you put a tube down the throat, they're dangerous. Mm-hmm. And they needed a battlefield anesthetic that wouldn't suppress breathing, and that's where ketamine came from. That's how it was invented.
Okay.
My question for you is going to be, and it's a question we've gotten from viewers before, is you've got NRX Pharmaceuticals, which by the way is a publicly traded company under the stock symbol NRXP. Then you've got Hope, which is a wholly owned sub or partially owned sub.
Well, Hope was a wholly owned sub until 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
And then we announced that Smith & Sauer, a wonderful family office that's been involved in the medical back office world for 20 years, came in and bought a third of Hope Therapeutics for $25 million.
Good. And
over time, the clinics we're acquiring are going to own stock in Hope. Other members of the investing community are going to buy stock in Hope. So NRX will own less and less of Hope, but Hope will get bigger and bigger, and we'd much rather own a hunk of a watermelon than all of a blueberry.
Sure, which is the way to think about it. So as a clinical stage biopharmaceutical company, NRX, what is the key goal there going forward? Is it to continue with drug development?
That's exactly right. Okay. NRX is going to continue drug development. We're applying for the new drug approval for ketamine first, and then NRX 101, our oral medicine that supplements the effect of ketamine second. We're looking at a really exciting opportunity that could be the first drug to actually cure schizophrenia in some patients. So every schizophrenia drug, and I learned about this disease when I was a college student. Every day on the way to organic chemistry at Princeton, I walked past this guy sitting on the bench in front of the Firestone Library with red sneakers, hair down to here, talking to people that I couldn't see, and his name was John Nash.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
And everybody saw A Beautiful Mind.
Yeah.
I walked past that man every day on the way to class. And the drugs that treat schizophrenia basically tamp down the brain. They're tranquilizers. That's why he preferred to be schizophrenic and live with the voices for 20 years until they finally invented a generation of drugs that enabled him to think and function while quieting the voices. But he openly said, when you listen to the interviews he gave, the voices never went away. The drugs helped him not have to listen to the voices.
Interesting.
So we're looking at an asset that could be the first drug that actually puts out the fire in the brain, that actually makes the voices not happen.
Oh, wow.
What is akathisia? You've brought it up before. Can you reignite that for us?
It's kind of a dirty secret of the pharmaceutical industry. It was described by a man named Lane at Pfizer in 1988, and it's a side effect of every known antidepressant on the market today, except for esketamine. All of the serotonin-targeted antidepressants have the potential to cause this side effect called akathisia, which is this horrible, irresistible need to move around, and the word comes from involuntary movement. But patients say they feel like they're jumping out of their skin. They can't focus their thoughts, they can't stay still, they can't function. There's a heartbreaking description from a woman whose husband was a very prominent Chicago lawyer, came home having just been given a new antidepressant by his doctor, antidepressant called Paxil, and couldn't stop tapping his feet under the table at dinner. And nobody could understand, why are you tapping your feet? And he didn't even know why he was tapping his feet.
Probably didn't know he was.
And the next day, witnesses saw him pacing up and down the subway station in Chicago, and before they knew it, he threw himself in front of a train.
Oh.
And it wound up as a huge class action lawsuit against the manufacturer of that drug. And it's one of the reasons that pharmaceutical companies have stopped developing new SSRI drugs. Of course, all of those drugs, and they're the primary drugs for treating depression, they all have the potential to cause akathisia, and akathisia is very closely linked to suicide. So our drug NRX 101, to the best of our knowledge, is the first drug that's ever been shown to decrease akathisia in a clinical trial. Wow. There's a drug that was just approved, Caplyta, that was just bought by J&J, that people are excited about because it causes less akathisia than the other drugs in its class. But to the best of our knowledge, nobody's ever shown an actual decrease in akathisia by administering a drug combined with an antidepressant.
His name is Jonathan Javitt, NRX Pharmaceuticals. NRXP is a stock symbol, of course, Hope Therapeutics. Is Hope going to go public at some point? Is that the idea for that? It will be a separate
we've told investors to expect that Hope will go public. My personal target, and I think I've said this in public, but you're a public forum, so I can say public things, is that we think Hope should probably stay private until it has $100 million in revenue. And we've said that we expect it to have about $100 million in revenue by this time next year.
Yeah, which is a pretty rapid rate. With respect to NRX pharmaceutical drug development, talk about the chronic pain thing. We don't ever talk about that much. Talk about your chronic pain. You have a really interesting chronic pain drug that I want to just...
Well, there's a story about chronic pain that is still not told. But our drugs, at least the drugs that we've already got moving towards FDA, affect something called the NMDA receptor in the brain. That's the one my brother discovered. That's where phencyclidine binds. That's where ketamine binds. And anesthesiologists have known for years that ketamine, which is a potent NMDA receptor antagonist, has an effect on pain. We've seen hints of effects on pain with oral NMDA antagonists. And I would bet that there's an oral drug to be developed. It may be NRX 101. We'd love to have the funds to do a chronic pain study with NRX.
When you say chronic, is this back pain? Is this all pain? Is it criteria specific to one type of pain?
This is the whole pain pathway. So if you touch your finger to a hot stove, there are 3 nerve cells between your fingertip and the part of your brain that says don't ever do that again.
Okay.
There's
So much more to talk about with Dr. Jonathan Javitt from NRX Pharmaceuticals right after this. And we're back on the Big Biz Show with Dr. Jonathan Javitt from NRX Pharmaceuticals.
Okay.
There's one nerve cell that goes from your fingertip to the low level of your spinal cord, where that nerve enters the spinal cord. There's another nerve cell that goes up your spinal cord to sort of the reptile part of your brain. And then there's a third neuron that goes from the old brain, the reptile brain, to your modern, well, you might not have a modern thinking brain, but they do.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Every time. Every single time.
I saw the setup.
And so there's a third neuron, and each one of those neurons, when you pass a signal to the next nerve cell in the chain, it's called a synapse. Each one of those synapses is controlled by this NMDA receptor. So there's a reason to believe that drugs that affect the NMDA receptor can block the transmission of pain signals.
And that's where the connection with NRX 101.
Yeah, and in fact, ketamine's a dissociative anesthetic. The reason ketamine works as an anesthetic is not that it puts you to sleep. It's that it blocks your brain from recognizing that something painful is happening.
I forgot to ask you when we were talking about suicidality, but also the bipolar effect that you'd mentioned in the past. Talk about that, because that's a big piece of NRX 101.
It is, and it's a big piece of suicidality. People who have what they call major depressive disorder, where their lives go from kind of okay to pretty sad, don't have that high a risk of suicide. It's sort of a 2 to 3-fold increased risk of suicide compared to people who aren't depressed. Mm-hmm. But people who have bipolar depression, those people who are like the brightest lights in the room, think Robin Williams, Anthony Bourdain, Kate Spade, Margaret Kidder, everybody knows people like that. When they get depressed, it's lethal.
Really?
And there's reason to think that their depression is much more treatable with these anti-NMDA drugs than major depressive disorder. So one of the studies that we're incorporating in our FDA submission is a clinical trial that was done in France at 7 French psychiatric hospitals. And they looked at people who were hospitalized for suicidal depression and gave them ketamine versus placebo. The people with bipolar depression had a much larger effect than the people with major depressive disorder.
There's a buzzword going around in the media, and we get PRs sent to us to talk about it. We've never talked about it. It's called dopamine. Dopamine is a buzzword right now. It's the word that people are talking about, just like oat bran was back in the 80s. Mm-hmm. Where does dopamine fit in all of this, or does it?
Well, the brain, if you look at a computer, you've got electrical impulses that go between one semiconductor and the next. If you look in the human brain, a nerve cell doesn't send an electrical impulse to the next nerve cell. It sends a chemical signal to the next nerve cell. You don't have electrical connections.
Right.
You have electrical connections within the cell. The cell depolarizes, an electrical signal travels along the cell, but when it wants to influence the next cell in line, it sends out chemicals that influence the next cell in line, and also a lot of the cells around. That's why the brain is an analog computer, it's not a digital computer. Okay. And dopamine is one of those neurotransmitters. Now, how it fits into the treatment of depression, I can't tell you today. There's not a dopamine drug right now that's on the market in the same way that you've got NMDA drugs that are coming to the market and serotonin drugs. But dopamine is very much part of how your emotions are influenced within your brain. The other one to watch for is called oxytocin. Some people call it the love hormone.
Why did I hear? Yeah, I've heard this before. Oxytocin.
And a lot of people know about oxytocin because it's used to induce uterine contractions.
That's what it is.
In labor.
That's what it was.
But
that was
oxytocin is
Pitocin.
also the reason that dogs and their owners love each other. So when people and dogs look into each other's eyes, each of them releases oxytocin.
Oh, no
They feel
kidding.
incredibly good. And
I feel better now that Jonathan's-
one of the difference between, well, I know you're a dog lover,
I am.
and so am I. But one of the reasons, between that, people don't have that same reaction to looking into the eyes of a timber wolf
Yeah.
is no oxytocin.
Greg and I were talking about, when you came on last time, talking about Mar-a-Lago, right?
That's right. That's right. You conducted an investor workshop.
We had, a number of the members of Mar-a-Lago invited us to come and talk. And because so many members of the incoming administration have, openly said, you think they'd be talking about global security and other stuff, but so many members of the incoming administration have openly focused on the need to approve this next generation of what they call psychedelic drugs for treatment of depression and PTSD. And part of it is the suicide epidemic in the U.S. is just out of control.
Yeah.
Losing 22 vets and active duty every day. I fly for the U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary, and just a couple of weeks ago, the Commandant of the Coast Guard stood down the whole Coast Guard for 90 minutes of training on stress resilience and suicide prevention.
Wow.
And that's happening Army, Navy, Air Force. The CDC will tell you that 16 million Americans seriously thought about suicide in the last year. 3.6 million Americans made a plan. 1.6 million attempted suicide. And when you talk about these diseases that we've been fighting ever since we were human, we've bent the survival curve on cancer. I mean, my mother's brother died of childhood leukemia when he was 5 years old. You probably don't know anybody. You know people whose children have gotten leukemia, but you probably don't know anybody who's lost a child to leukemia recently.
Right.
It's been a huge success. Even breast cancer is now thought of as a chronic disease, not as a disease that's going to kill you in 6 months. We've not bent the survival curve on suicidal depression.
But it sounds like we're about to, potentially, with NRX.
Well, I hope we're
and
I hope we're going to do it. But not only us. J&J has brought out Spravato. We're not the only people who are going after this. But as a species, I predict that suicidal depression will be a much less lethal condition in 5 years.
Okay, before we let you go today, I want to talk about 2025 in as much as what you can talk about. I know you're a CEO of a public company, but you're also on a dual focus here between NRX and Hope. What are you looking forward to most with respect to each company going forward here for the next 12 months?
NRX has told its investors that it's developing 2 drugs. One is ketamine, and the first generation of ketamine is going to be a lot like the ketamine you can buy today, except it's not going to have a toxic preservative in it. That preservative was put in there because once upon a time they used to use the same vial in multiple patients, so you needed to be able to put a needle in a couple times and have it be sterile. Well, if you're using it in one patient, there's no reason to have a toxic preservative in there. So that'll be our first generation. But we've already talked about how ketamine can't be given into the skin right now because it's so acid. So our next generation with ketamine is going to be a pH neutral form of ketamine that could be put into something that looks like an insulin pump and given on a longer term basis. And I predict that before the year's out, we'll show people what our third generation of ketamine is going to look like, and that'll really excite people.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what the next is. I'm looking forward to having you come back in. Of course, you can watch the BizUmentary on suicidality and NRX, as well as Jonathan here on BizTV, as well as in Bloomberg El Financiero. And I will tell you, there's going to be a more scientific version of it because I think there's a population that talks your language that needs to hear what you're talking about that are not like the rest of us. Always great to have you in studio, Dr. Jonathan Javitt, NRX Pharmaceuticals. NRXP is the ticker symbol, and of course, you can always go to our website and pick up his websites. So that's with Hope Therapeutics Incorporated and NRX Pharmaceuticals. Something to look at for the next several, and we'll get you back out here in the next couple of weeks, buddy. Good to see you.
That was fun.
There you go. Big Biz Show. More to come. Stand by. Big Biz Show, BizTV, Bloomberg, El Financiero, as well as American Life Network and American Forces Network in 175 countries and all the ships to sea. Great to have you along. Look who's here today. Got Mary and Greg and myself and Dan Negroni. Mike Costa's taking a couple days off for some family stuff. Great to see you. Dan, of course, Chasing Relevance, and of course the CEO. You're more than anything, you're a coach, I think. I can say.
That's so funny you say that, because that's what I was actually just listening to on the car ride up here. I'm a coach.
I think you're a coach.
I think I'm
you're an
coach.
entrepreneur. You're
Because I teach.
You do, but you're a coach more than anything.
Yeah.
And you're a coach for both sides in terms of business and human capital.
And I'm a damn good coach.
I think you are a good coach.
I think I'm in the top 10%. That's what I was listening to. Top one right here, right now. Maybe.
We tapped into productivity loss last time you were here.
Yeah.
And that garnered a ton of email and questions from our viewers, and talking about Gen Z and lost productivity and the fact that they're not self-starters as much, I think you may have mentioned, as we were, or they need
I think the numbers are staggering.
Yeah, talk about it.
Like it's $7 trillion in lost revenue. If you do the computation, it's about $25,000, or in lost productivity, $25,000 a person.
$25,000 per. That's like the U.S. debt clock.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Right.
Probably worse.
Yeah.
So this is to a lack of being self-starters, or a lack of what is?
I think it's a whole bunch of things. So think about this. I was just reading this statistic. We spend 30% of our time online and 2.5 hours a day on social media as Americans. All of us, all ages.
Now, social media, is that, we're talking about Facebook, Instagram, social media?
Facebook, Instagram, that stuff, 2.5 hours.
I think the kids are bending that curve, because I don't spend more than
Yeah, for sure. I think so too.
30% of your day, 8 hours is online. So whether you're working on your computer for your job, and we all know how ADD we are with all the notifications coming in, and you're over to Yahoo or Google or whatever you're over to.
You're absolutely right. That's a whack-a-mole thing with me.
Yeah.
And then you add in, that's how their brain works, because they've been wired, because they grew up with this phone with the distraction, and we've all become addicted to it. They grew up with the addiction. And so it's a...
This was a study that you that you referred to.
That's technical speak.
Yeah, there's technical.
Well, so let me ask you about, because we can change the way we hire.
Yeah.
You can change the way you organize groups and projects.
Change who you hire and how you hire them.
Right.
Yeah. And you can change the teams up for sure and get the right people on the teams.
So based upon the staggering data that you talk about, in terms of there's a 53% decrease in big picture strategic thinking, or 60%
so
decline
between the
in
generations. So if you look at the generations, here's what's going on. 53% reduction in thinking about strategy. They go to depth.
Yeah.
120% increase for their generation to do details. So it's none of this. Again, we're doing this.
I want to talk about this stat about a 60% decline in trusting your gut instinct.
Yeah.
And I wonder,
That's a big
I know.
one.
I'm thinking
That's a crazy
of
one.
this switch that we moved to, this gentle parenting, and parenting that has been, we do things for our kids. And the parents of this generation were more involved in their lives. So did they then lack the ability to have to think on their own and do things?
Yeah,
for
there's
themselves?
so many factors. The social media is one of them. External resource telling me what's good, not me telling myself what's good. Me believing everything I see. I do social media and it actually feeds me more of what I want to see. Plus the parenting thing, which is everyone's trying to do everything for me and not don't want me to have any pain.
Yes.
Right? They want to prepare the road for me instead of me for the road.
Right.
So there are all these things going in, which creates this, I don't really know. I need more information. Someone has to tell me.
Yeah.
Versus in our generation, we went in there and we're like, let's go.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I got 10 ideas. Matter of fact, right?
Yeah.
And I'll have 10 tomorrow.
Yeah.
Different ones, right?
Well, if and we joke about this forever. Remember the participation trophy problem
Yes.
that we talked about in the mid-90s?
Right.
Everyone gets a participation trophy. There is no losers. It's coming to fruition now, to all of that, where we were kind of chided for being so mean to the kids and saying we want to be more inclusive. And I'm not talking about racially inclusive or ability inclusive. I'm talking about we just didn't want to hurt any kids' feelings.
Yeah.
That's starting to come to the roost, is it?
I think it's right where we are as a society.
It is because of that potentially?
Is because life has become really easy. It's probably like the Romans, right?
But it's easier for us too, though, right?
It is easier for us too, but there's a big disconnect in the world and in the workplace, and we believe that they have it very different than us. We just don't understand, and we're not willing to spend the time to understand how they've been shaped or formed and then coach them accordingly, right? Go back to the coach.
Right.
We got to be the coach to understand them. You can get them to think, in teaching, I did a class where I didn't give them any rules, didn't give them any guidebooks, didn't give them any detail, and made them make it up, and they can learn. But I had to spend 15 weeks doing it painfully every day.
Dan Negroni is our guest. He is, of course, a speaker, a keynote speaker, a CEO coach, among many other things. You can go to dannegroni.com and, of course, his book, Chasing Relevance. I want to talk about what I think is a big issue here. And I remember you and I had kids growing up at the same time. We knew each other at the same time. And we actually talked about this a couple times in the gym about our kids first, our kids have been flying first class for a long time, and suddenly maybe we met the enemy and it's you and I, not them.
Yeah.
And suddenly I remember wanting to have my kids have their first job in a very face-forward public way. So they were forced to deal with, and one of them took a job at a place called The Habit, which is a burger place at the cash register. The other one took a job at a place called Chicken Charlie's at the fair.
Oh, really?
Same thing. And the law of unintended circumstances was a couple of kids that probably would dig their toe in the sand at the time and probably not talk turned out to be that way. When you look at this study you're talking about, that there's a 45% increase in Gen Z's preference for text-based communication versus conversations.
And a step-by-step guide.
Yeah,
100% increase in I need a step-by-step guide, and a 45, just write it down for me. I am not comfortable with, I get upset, I get anxious. They don't even want to be in the workplace. How do we reverse that trend?
Or do we want to?
Yeah, for sure we want to. People,
I think we
people
have to,
need,
right?
yeah.
For Social Security reasons. Right? I mean,
so right, Craig.
who's gonna fulfill?
Take care of the old buffalo?
Right? Thanks. Where was that, Trace? But no, it's true. Hey, thanks.
Yes.
It's our generation is going to rely on the next generation and the generation after that, obviously, to fulfill the funds that need to be there in order for us to live.
And they also have a decrease in wanting change or having innovation. Like they want things to stay the same. And so we got to bridge the gap. There's this huge disconnect. It's what I've been talking about since 2016 is we are disconnected, we don't understand them, and we got to get it right. There's a leadership deficit out there. It's costing us dollars, and we're just on different spectrums.
So is this a U.S. problem or is this a worldwide problem?
Yes.
I know it's a U.S. problem, but is it limited to the U.S.?
No,
it's not limited to the U.S.
We just did a study. You can go to my website on the front page and download the study, but you'll see the global findings and the U.S. findings, and neither are good.
Really?
Well, there's opportunity. Look, they like to do detail. They really are more inclusive. They care about people. They want to feel safe and all that stuff.
Are they collaborative?
I think when they feel all those things, yeah.
Do you feel like this is a generational thing, or do you feel like that, within our society at least, we've been dealing with this forever because every generation has an issue with the next generation, right? Oh, those kids, they don't get it.
So let's use...
Those lazy kids.
Yeah. Let's use an improv rule, yes and. Yes, it is a generational thing, and all the other things are going on as well. Meaning this has been going on since the beginning of time, but technology and the way they've been raised as this generation with the phone, with not, learning and growing and thinking and playing outside, doing all those things, it really is and the study shows it specifically. You can see what a silent generation did, what a Gen X did, a millennial and a Gen Z, and you can see in each of those instances how it goes down more and more.
This interesting. There's a 100% increase in Gen Z's desire for best practices and a 73% drop in valuing innovation for the sake of innovation.
Yeah.
Is that best practices the guidebook?
It's the guidebook and the detail, right? Best practices, I want to know what I need to do. I want to know how I have to do things. I want everything to be done the right way. And I need it in writing. I need to understand it. And everyone should do it. Everyone.
But progress and innovation, regardless of why, is still progress and innovation.
But it's change. And what they feel is they want the rules, they want the structure, they want the playbook, and the change.
But what about you don't
tough.
know what you don't know? Which causes some of the greatest inventions and greatest discoveries in history, mainly a polio vaccine would be one of them.
For sure.
Post-it notes would be the other one, and Teflon would be the other one.
I think what they would say, they'd love to work in that environment, hoping that the environment would be more structured for them to get in that way. But when you go loosey-goosey, if you do a Dan or Sully ADD thing, they will not follow you.
Then they
will
are
leave you.
fired.
Yeah,
No, I can't listen. I get sued for that. Dan, let's continue this next week because I think there's more to do on this topic.
Yeah.
I think the next phase of this is, so what are you going to, you're the tip of the spear.
Now what?
Now you got to, now
Now
what?
Now AI comes into play, and they just
Dan Negroni.
type everything in. Get it all put it
Well,
out.
That's a good, yeah.
So we're going to AI and how to fix it and why
Yeah.
Dan's in charge coming up. Thanks, buddy. We'll see you next week.
Thank
Big Biz Show. More coming up. Stand by. Hey, they're live from the Loft 100 studios in sunny San Diego, California. Big Biz Show's on the air. Great to have you along today. Wow. Have you seen the stock market? Have you even looked? Do you even look at the stock market? What? You know, the guys in the band even look at the stock market. You don't look at the stock market at all? I know you have retirement investing.
I do, but my days are too full. I too much going on. That's just
Do you
not
check your
on the
credit
top
report?
of my list. No, not as frequently
You
as
check
you.
your
I
bank
do
balance?
it. I do, yes, but not as frequently as you do.
Check your bank balance.
I'm juggling all the different things.
I'm just showing you how easy it is as I'm on the air
Yes.
to check the stock market.
Yes.
Here we go. Boom.
I'm juggling about 40,000 other things.
Oh, you are?
Aside from
Oh, you are. Okay, is this Maccecchini or Maccecchini?
Maccecchini.
Maccecchini. See, I had to hold
Dr.
on.
Maccecchini.
Tell me about Maria.
Oh, she's fabulous.
She's a
kidding me?
This is a
This
Annovis
looks
Bio.
amazing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Alzheimer's work.
Yes.
Is she here?
Well,
Is she in studio? Do
now
we have
define here.
Yeah.
Is she on?
Because if she's here via Zoom, yes.
Do we have a president CEO of a biotech company on the show?
Yes.
Wow, you guys are important. Maria, sorry I messed up your name so badly.
No, it was perfect. It was absolutely perfect.
Molto bene.
See.
Let me ask you something. When we talk about Alzheimer's, before we talk about your company, how are we doing overall in this arc of the story for the disease, globally and in the U.S., in your opinion?
We are doing pretty badly. And the reason is there aren't any good drugs. The drugs that are on the market have an effect, but a minor effect. And then people spend a lot of money on what I think is sold to them as, it may help your brain, and people pay. And it doesn't really help your brain. So somebody was saying something about a shopping list. Maybe the best way right now to stave off Alzheimer's is shop the right stuff.
Yeah.
Stay healthy.
Let's talk about Annovis and what makes you different, because a lot of this problem is toxicity and so on and so forth. And I know that because I'm starting to see the early signs with my own mother. Talk about what's going on and what makes you sort of the tiebreaker in terms of drug development and drug delivery development, so on and so forth.
Well, as the brain ages, and also as it has infarcts, it has other injuries. You may have hit your head when you were 15, and eventually the brain will say, okay, this old injury is coming back to haunt me. But as the brain has more and more injuries and ages, what happens is that it accumulates toxic proteins, toxic stuff, which kills your nerve cells. And basically what we're doing, we are removing that toxic stuff.
I think when you talk about toxic stuff, can you be specific? Because is it created because of the treatment? Is it created within you? Where does that emanate from?
It's created within us. We make proteins that have a function. Okay, they help synaptic transmission. They help you think. They help you move. They help you do things. And as they get old, they become kind of crooked. They become little blobs like plaques or tangles. and then they're toxic. So something that we have had all our lives that has helped us to think and to move and to be a normal human being turns against us because they get old and decrepit and they become toxic.
Dr. Maccecchini, can you talk a little bit about your lead drug candidate? I think it's Buntanetap. Am I saying that correctly?
That is correct. You also said my name correctly.
All
Thank
right. I practiced.
Look at this.
I practiced.
Even a broken clock is correct twice a day.
Oh, be nice to her.
Thank you. I'm the only female around here, except for Chris in our control room, so thank you. So yeah, can you talk about where you're at in the arc of Buntanetap and how that can help? I think it helps diminish the proteins you were just talking about.
Yes.
Is that accurate?
Yes, exactly. So I was saying you get all this decrepit old stuff that kills your nerve cells, and our drug makes it not do it. And so the nerve cells survive, the brain keeps functioning, and that's really what you need to think normally and to not get Alzheimer's, or if you have Alzheimer's, not to progress.
Oh yeah, that's
we are in phase 3, which means we have treated over 1,000 patients. So we are really at the last step of development. We need to do one more study. It's a big study. It's 750 patients and it's 18 months. But that's the last study. Then we'll be on the market.
Maria, I have a question about your other drugs. As you look at that FDA chart there that you see on your website, and I see some other therapies there. Talk about that and what they do.
So Parkinson's is the same drug. What is interesting for a regular person today is that there are drugs out in the market that actually could help you. And as you see in the purple in the middle, it is Buntanetap with Trulicity, which is a GLP-1 agonist, Buntanetap with Viagra, which is a PDE4 inhibitor, and then Buntanetap with both. Now, why is that? If you think that in order to be healthy, I was telling you, buy the right stuff, go to the supermarket and buy fresh food. Well, food and diet is very important for your brain. That's really where Trulicity comes in, or GLP-1 agonist. They regulate sugar metabolism. You could do the exact same thing with good diet.
No kidding.
And then you need good blood circulation, because good blood circulation cleans up your brain, it keeps your heart healthy, and that is Viagra. So if you combine Trulicity with Viagra with our drug, you do really well.
The interesting part of this is, for many people, Maria, when they're hearing about this, they're already in their 50s or late 40s or even even older. Is this something that they can change their diet and change their activity to do this, or are they subject to just having to do medical therapies going forward?
That's an excellent question. One of the difficulties about giving you a really good answer is how long do you have to be healthy? What we know for a fact, if you start at 75, 80, you could just forget it. I mean, it's a terrible thing to say, but your body has already had too many negatives. Your heart is already very much impaired, your sugar metabolism, your diabetes, whatever. But if you start at 60, could you be 65? Could you be 70? We really don't know that.
No, not yet.
But the earlier, the better. And I think overall, people think that up until 70, you have a chance of changing your life.
Maria Maccecchini is her name, founder, president, and CEO. Did I say that right?
Maccecchini.
Perfect. Come on, tell him perfect.
Nobody ever tells me this. Will you come back on the air with us and hang out with us more?
She's so nice.
Will you come back at another date, please? We'd love to have you back.
I have some more
Only if you
questions.
give me a whiskey.
You know what? You're coming in studio.
That's right.
Stock symbol ANVS. Big Biz Show. Stand by.